Hey folks, it's Professor Diffley. This is History 100, Chapter 4, Part 2 of the lecture slide videos. Alright, so we're talking about Alexander the Great. This just give you an idea of how far and wide Alexander had conquered. This goes into modern-day Egypt. Modern-day India and Pakistan, into modern-day Afghanistan, especially this area up here called Bactria. I mean, you can see this is just a massive area to conquer, especially for the era. Really was. It's quite astounding how far he's able to conquer in all of this. So, who was Alexander the Great? So he molded himself after the legendary warrior Achilles. Really did think maybe he might have thought that he was unstoppable in many ways. He was not your normal commander either. He actually fought out amongst his soldiers in complete disregard for his own personal safety. He, would polish his armor so it shined, big headdress so that everybody could see him on the battlefield for his soldiers. He would ride straight at the enemy, right into the middle of it. Really was, a legendary warrior, and this Bucephalus, his legendary horse. The story is that this was a wild horse that nobody could break, but Alexander could. Again, giving you an idea of how legendary this man becomes is there are stories about Alexander in sub-Saharan Africa, places he's never been. There are some horse traders in Afghanistan, that area of the world, who still sell horses, claiming that the horse is descended from Bucephalus and all that. But just an incredible warrior again. Complete disregard, reckless even there. He conquers Greece, Egypt, through the Persian Empire, into modern India, and beyond, all before 30. He sends the Persian king fleeing, defeats them at every turn, outnumbered, just a great tactician, and just by sheer force of will is able to win over and over again. Giving you an idea of just how powerful he is. And the message he sent is that there was the island of Tyre, which its walls went right to the ocean. You can see the red here on this island here, and they went right up to the shore. Alexander, this place was thought to be impossible to conquer. Alexander built a mole. It's sort of like a pier where he could just march out his siege machines, battering rams to take down the city. Just give you an idea of this, is he completely changed the face of the world. If you look up Tyre on Google Maps, it's no longer an island. The mole he constructed here, so big that it has from the water carrying silt and sand and everything else, it is now connected to the mainland. So, how far is Alexander willing to go to conquer? Literally change the face of the planet to do that. It also makes people understand that there is nowhere to go to hide from him. Ambition had no bounds. Even though he's unable in modern Afghanistan, Bactria, which is modern Afghanistan, he couldn't subdue the local guerrilla forces. Side note that Afghanistan is often called the place that empires go to die, because no one has ever been fully able to conquer it and control it, including today. The U.S. has, I guess, gotten the closest. Soviets even tried, others nearly impossible. But he marries Roxanne, a Bactrian princess. He'd gone further than even the Persians had gone. He plans invasions of the Indian subcontinent, all of that. Again, give you an idea of how far he's going here. He finally gets into India, he runs into things he had never seen. One, he didn't realize how big the world was, how big India was. They go into monsoon season, these devastating rains. India has war elephants. But just show you again, then, his horses were afraid of the elephants, so him and his men capture elephants and use them, and it creates this idea that you need war elephants now, which no is the best in war. Elephants have a tendency to panic at loud noise is another thing, turn around and run away, and just crush anybody there. But nonetheless, he changes tactics, is able to start winning, but realizes how far he needs to go. His men finally mutiny on the banks of the Hyphasis River. thousands of miles home, gone for a decade or more. He goes back home to Babylon, where he begins his plan to conquest the Arabian Peninsula, and then he's even got ideas of conquering Africa. And you can see more of this. How did he do this when he got there? Rule. He took over. He kept local administrative systems intact. I mean, really, the big picture is his conquest for your average person changed their lives very little. They still had to pay taxes. It went to some emperor or king that they would never see. So he really didn't really change local life that much, other than building cities. And I guess, if you're going to conquer and build cities, you might as well name them after yourself. Alexandria. He builds many of these. Again, but he also adopts part of his local cultures too. So when he's in Babylon, he dresses like a Babylonian. When he's in Persia, he looks like a Persian. When he's in Egypt, he's dressing like that as well. And even Persia, usually when you depose a king, you usually get rid of the royal family by executing them. Instead, but he endears himself to the locals by adopting the family of the Persian emperors, calls them mother and sister and daughter and things like that. So this didn't really always sit well with his friends, because it seemed like he was going local, as they would say. That the Greeks viewed themselves as better than everybody, and the Macedonians even more so. But nonetheless, I mean, this seemed to work to keep his empire intact for the time being. Again, I say time being because once he's dead, the whole thing falls apart. But these shows you all the cities he created. Alexandria, the furthest, just as far as it goes. Well, these different places. Again, he did spread Greek culture all the way around. Koine, Koine, is the new language. Comes a mostly universal language. He really does benefit the sciences. He's a student of Aristotle, so he comes and collects scientific knowledge everywhere, sending it back, specimens from all over. He does try to mix these cultures, at least that's the idea. I mean, how much that works, it's unclear, but he builds Greek-style cities with agoras, stoas, everything. There, and so he begins to spread Greek culture and really does create, in some places at least, a new sort of mixed culture. Alexander does die 323 BC in Babylon. Causes fever, hard drinking, and hard life fighting. He's been wounded so many times, he never rests. Again, that hard drinking part of it. Problem is when Alexander dies, he's got no plans for the continuation of his empire. Maybe it's because he thought he would live forever. But on his deathbed, when his generals and advisors asked him what should happen to his empire and who should it go to, he said, the strongest amongst you, essentially causing them to fight over the remains of it. I mean, this gets brutal. They create these successor kingdoms, all these kingdoms that are going to fight for centuries until the Romans take them all out. They hunt down and murder all of Alexander's family so that none can claim it back. But again, you can see some more of this in the video. And this is the Hellenistic kingdoms he creates here. Really big ones, Antigonid, Ptolemaic, and the Seleucid kingdoms are the ones we're going to look at. Ptolemaic Egypt, and that's right, the Ptolemies take over one of his Macedonian generals, and they will go until Cleopatra, the famous Cleopatra, in the age of Caesar and Augustus Caesar, Julius Caesar and Augustus, the Seleucids, and the Antigonoids, who run up there. Seleucids, they're named after the leaders there, but they're all going to fight each other for centuries and centuries. And again, weakening themselves, letting another group come in, the Romans. Again, you can sort of see a pattern of history there. Again, Hellenistic means Greek-like, and it is used as this term where you start to see these emergence in the Eastern Mediterranean world of mixed Near Eastern and Greek tradition. Great innovations in politics, arts, philosophy, lit. Cultural mixing in areas of Egypt and other places really does change things. And make sure you take a look at the text here on this. They divided. Monarchy comes back to the Greek world and will last for a while. These kingdoms really do fight each other forever, as I mentioned. Here's some more. So how did they establish rule? Because here's the thing, they don't have legitimacy. There's no blood claim to the thrones of these new kingdoms. So how do they do it? Military power and personal prestige. Remember, they're the greatest warriors and military machines on the planet. Personal prestige is about the kings ingratiating themselves to the locals, co-opting them into their power and into their system, through gifts and things like that. Ruling strategy, incorporate local customs and culture. So the Ptolemies in Egypt become like the pharaohs. They adapt Egyptian dress. Egyptian practices of the children marrying each other, the brothers and sisters marrying each other, but they really do adapt to these local areas. Strong military, effective administration, mix the Greeks with the locals, co-opt the local nobles, make it so that, what do we mean by co-op? Make it so that the local population's welfare is tied to your own, right? So if I'm king, and I'm doing well, you guys do well. And so make it, you want me to succeed because your power and your wealth is tied to that. And again, those personal ties there. More rule and strategies. They created two-tiered systems. Greeks and Macedonians filled the top tier. They import immigrants in for that. They really do see themselves as superior in that. Again, the cities were the power centers of all of this. Mutual rewards, as I was just saying. You can see all this. There's notes on this too. But you see how far his Alexander the Great's coins will go. I mean, this is Ptolemaic Egypt. Why? Again, remembering Alexander, he was beloved by so many. You see this new culture that develops here. They competed, again, arete. These are Greeks, and so they compete over everything. So these empires are going to, and kingdoms are going to compete over everything. Who can get the best artists, intellectuals? By far, Alexandria and Egypt, Ptolemaic Egypt, was the heart and soul of the intellectual world there. They created the first museum, a home of the muses, Greek goddesses, and it's the first research institute. The library there next to it, collecting over all these scrolls and books from around the world. Wrote classics that people can still refer. The rivers of Europe, starting to map those, the wonders of the world. Really, Alexandria in Egypt becomes the most important intellectual center of them all. Even create lighthouses, all of that. But the culture and art that comes out of this is really influenced by these three things. Impact of royal wealth and patronage. They are writing for the upper classes, so the art in that is going to be for them. Increased emphasis on private life and emotion. Why? If you're got to write what the royals want, you're not going to talk about politics, that sort of thing. You're going to avoid that. So you're going to talk about things like that. Greater interaction. Here we see a Buddha who is depicted in Greek dress, and so you begin to see these mixing there of that. Again, focused on the classics. The Greeks had everything idealized in that. This is emotions and personal feelings, commoners, wrinkled old people, drunkards, all this. Here's a battered boxer, all these things that they never would have shown in the ancient there. You can see more of this. Dying barbarians. Children also became popular as sort of these subjects of art, almost their peacefulness and their I guess goodness in an era where there's constant warfare. Nudes became more and more common. Here are the three graces. And all that. Poetry, again, avoids political topics, but you really get to see for the first time this idea of the country bumpkin, right? This difference between those who live in the city and those in the countryside. The urban world was looked at as better, the country folk as lesser, that sort of idea. This was also written for the upper classes. These erudite references. This is, it was complicated to read. You had to be highly educated to understand this. You had to know all the myths, all these references. It was not for regular people. This made the elites feel even better about themselves and separates them from everyone else. But one area you did start to get women more and more writing is in epigrams. Originally, these were short poems on tombstones, but these become a bona fide form of literature where women are writing about their personal feelings, what it's like to be a woman, their relationships, things like that. So this is a new form of artwork here. You also get more and more writing. You get comedies, the sitcom, right? The situational comedy, where it's a series almost. So you get new sorts of writing, but we still have sitcoms. This is like, think of TV, the most, Friends, Seinfeld, the old famous ones. You got all sorts on TV today. They start getting that. New philosophies, all trying to figure out what is the best way to live. They all say you need to do this by looking at yourself rather than the outside world. Inner peace, inner tranquility, because the world is so rough. They get rid of Plato's metaphysics. Again, they follow the doctrine that only what we can see and observe is what we should focus on. The idea that matter, what consists of matter, is what truly exists, what we can touch, we can feel, that sort of thing. You get different views here. Again, this is discussed well in the book there. More and more on this. Stoicism, very much watch the video, and especially use the video for Stoicism. Very, very important. This will come back up again in the Romans and later. And that you have cynicism and others. Actually, we'll start there. We'll start with cynicism in the last part 3 of these videos in a second. All right. Thank you.